What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is accredited by the American Institute of Architects. He's a lead accredited professional and certified with the National Council of Architecture Registration Boards. He brings focus to all projects on creating beautiful spaces. He has over 25 years experience with award-winning projects around the world. He's a principal at the Gettys Group Companies. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris McDonough.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan.
Welcome, Chris.
Glad to be here.
I'm so glad to be here too. And you know, this being Defining Hospitality, I'm super excited. Every time I come into your office here in Chicago, the view is amazing. I love those corncob buildings because Wilco is one of my favorite bands.
Oh, there you go.
And every time I see it, I take a picture and send it to a friend of mine.
Yep.
But I think also what's cool, I haven't done many of these in-person ones.
Yeah.
And talk about being made to feel comfortable. From the moment I walked in to us sitting here, I've experienced a different kind of hospitality.
That's awesome to hear. That's exactly what we want. We set our office up to be that way. We really do take that to heart, the being hospitable with our friends, our partners, our clients, our team members here. So, and yes, we love this conference room's view. It's inspiring on its own, just the architecture of the city. I'm a Chicago born and bred person, and just never wanted or needed to leave, really. So, and it's also kind of cool. We can see a number of our projects just looking out our own window. So
I love it.
Love it. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a fantastic space. So I guess firstly, thank you for having me here, and I'm just super grateful.
Well, thanks for thinking of us and thinking of me. I'm happy. I'm back at Gettys. I'm sure we'll chat about that later.
Yeah,
but
so, and that's actually one of the things that I was most excited about. In particular with you, and I think that could be a good thread for talking about hospitality, because there are a few companies out there that have this kind of boomerang, right? So you're here, you have a lot of experience at this or another company. You go, and then I'm always intrigued by the people who come back, and that feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because I love that boomerang effect. And to have you come back, I was so excited to hear that you came back.
Yeah.
And before we get into that journey, I guess as far as you feeling comfortable and being here and with the team and the team growing and where we are in the industry, as you think about hospitality, like what does it mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a feeling, really, and hospitality. What I learned from leaving Gettys and coming back, and I worked at a couple of different places and experienced different things. My heart really is in hospitality. I can kind of express that. I really gained a lot from some other places I worked at and had good experiences, but my heart's really in hospitality, mostly because of the feeling you get, or the feeling that we want to give guests and people that are experiencing the spaces that we design. You just kind of get a feeling, right? And hospitality really is giving people an escape, kind of, right? They're in a space that they don't normally experience at home or in their day-to-day lives, and so it's kind of a space that gives people an aspirational feeling and wow, I want to experience something different. The other big part of it really is that the spaces, they have a story behind them. They have like an ethos or a feeling. So experiencing that story, transporting people into a different mindset, they can kind of escape a little bit. Those are the spaces that we live and thrive on and love to do. So.
And when we were speaking, I guess last week or the week before, I don't remember, when you mentioned that this idea of these aspirational spaces, right? They strive, they allow us to have a different kind of experience. One of the things I was really taken that you said was there's an impact that you leave in the projects and spaces that you work in, where not only are the people that are in that space experiencing something new and different, they're impacted in such a way that when they go somewhere else, there's kind of like a butterfly effect or a paying it forward or, wow, I didn't know that I could feel this way in this place. Let me bring it to other spaces.
Yeah, I think people talk about those spaces too, right? They share, when they come back from a trip or traveling, or even just, if you're walking, if you're in the city, you pop into one of those spaces, you remember those. They're destinations, and you want to share that with people. You want to like bring that experience to somebody else, and then in hopes of that they'll have that same experience too. Or it is a very shared situation, right? You can compare and contrast places that you've been, that I've been, and you kind of get excited about that, right? And again, it's all about not having that in your day-to-day life. It's really that, I think it's like a haven, an escape, whether it's public areas or a guest room itself, right? You're kind of in your own little world, basically. So, but yeah, it's a memory, and you always want to share those memories with people. So, yeah.
Another thing I'm intrigued by is that, oftentimes in many of these conversations, just experience and being in our world, there seems to be this like dividing line between architects and interiors, right? And to hear you say, you lead with your heart, or you really have to have your heart in it. I know a lot of architects, and and the stereotypical architect, I wouldn't hear that come out of their mouth in a sense that, right, they want to build these edifices, these monuments of these great works, but oftentimes I find that the interiors are the most important part, where everyone is feeling and having that experience.
Totally. Yeah. So
how did you, on your journey, come from like being fully immersed in architecture to really then saying, you know what, this is, I want to get my heart more into it through the interior design side?
Yeah, I mean, I look back on it a lot, and I've always appreciated both sides of the coin, the exterior and the interior. And yes, a trained architect, worked in architectural firms first, and then just sort of over time migrated into interior design. And so I actually kind of combine the words. I mean, interior architecture, is a thing. It's a little more maybe of an international type of profession, but the marriage between the two, I think, is always the most successful process. And it is, like you said, it's kind of sometimes very clear when an architect designs something and an interior designer designs something, and the two didn't collaborate, or the two didn't work together to create that story or to create that experience together. So I think it just turned into a situation where tying all those parts and pieces together, the programming of the spaces influences the actual three-dimensional space, right? So it just kind of turned out. I mean, it really wasn't orchestrated. To your point, I more appreciate the spaces you experience rather than the buildings you look at, right? If both can be amazing, fantastic. But I've always appreciated both. I'll walk around and take pictures of exteriors of buildings just as much as I do of interiors of buildings. But I think back to that point of experiencing spaces and using spaces, the other part of it is like it can be a beautiful space, but if it doesn't really function or work well, that's really frustrating too. So I love when you see people using hotel lobbies or restaurants or bars the way you intended them to be used, right? There could be a specific detail at a bar, a lower section, or a little spot that you created, and then you see someone using it that exact way. We've done some really cool like lobby stairs or seating areas where we can imagine kids playing on them for a little while, and then later at night it turns into just kind of a communal bar space, and people are just kind of hanging out on those. I think that like I said, that marriage between the use of the space and then the feeling of the space just turned out what I really wanted to work on.
Love it.
And I think hotels allow for that, right? There's the blending of interior and exterior also just is a necessary function for some hotel spaces. So that gives us opportunities here to kind of blend the two together.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
And then I heard you say earlier you're born and raised pure Chicagoan. Is that like within the city limits?
I grew up on Southwest Side, just like near Midway Airport. So I could see this. Actually, I could see the city skyline from the one bridge right by my house. So every time we drove over the bridge, I would see it in the distance. So I don't know, I always just kind of had a gravitation toward that. Went to school here in Illinois, at University of Illinois, and then wanted to work in Chicago.
So growing up on the Southwest side, does that make you a Cubs fan or a Sox fan?
Well, I'm breaking the rules. It should be a Sox fan, but I'm a Cubs fan through and through.
Okay.
It's always a battle in the city here. My dad was Cubs fan, my mom was Sox fan, or the families, but Cubs fan all the way. I'm a huge baseball fan, actually, just in general.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Me too.
But Cubs, yeah. And I saw the autographed baseballs behind you in your office. We need to chat about those after this.
Oh, yeah, there's some good ones.
I have a few at my house, too. We'll compare notes.
Okay, great. Yeah, most of those are from my mother-in-law.
Oh,
so
cool.
She was I don't know, the skipper, or she helped run the Admirals Club at San Francisco International Airport.
Wow.
So a lot of time, like one of them is Joe DiMaggio, because he's from San Francisco.
Sure.
He would come in and out.
Yeah.
I have a couple from Willie Mays.
Sure.
Because he would always come in, and that was back in the day when they could hold the plane for you. And
Yeah. I have those same autographed baseballs at my house, too.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So,
But Cubs fan, yeah, I know.
well, and that's a whole other kind of hospitality where
Sure.
on a nice summer day in this town, and you're just kind of walking around,
Yeah.
everyone's like, "You going to the game? You going to the game?"
I
And
know.
it's almost like the biggest outdoor bar,
Oh, totally, yeah.
and it's so much fun.
It is.
Men, women, everyone there just having a good time.
Yeah.
And some of them are watching the game, but most of them are just talking and having a great time.
Yeah, it's like it's a communal kind of shared experience, right? I mean, that's hospitality to some degree. You're just outside. But yeah, that's one of those experiences, and that's what's really great about hospitality. I mean, I do like too, right? Especially downtown here, and I take the train in every day. And on some of those days where people are getting off the train with jerseys on, you just exactly know what they're going to do, where they're going to go. You can almost plan out their whole day for them. It's kind of fun to see all that when they're walking around.
Well, also, and just thinking about, going back to your journey as far as into design via architecture, growing up on that bridge where you could see downtown, Chicago just being such a world-class city for architecture.
Yeah.
How old were you when you first knew that you're like, this is what I want to study, or this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I kind of got lucky in terms of, I took drafting classes as a kid, right? I don't want to date myself.
With a pencil.
With my silver hair. But yeah, I learned to draw by hand, sure, right? So literally like middle school and high school, I was taking drafting classes and art classes and things like that, and just kind of stayed with that and really enjoyed it and thought, okay, well, I'll go to architecture school, and if I don't like it, well, we'll see. I can switch out if I go to a big university. But I just always loved that. And, some of the cliches maybe as a kid, I was building kind of the erector sets and the panel sets and those things. But I think it was just sort of there's two sides to it. There's the creative side, and then there's sort of the technical side. And my, college curriculum was really broad. It was all aspects of architecture and design. And then when you move into your grad school, you can sort of select your specialty. So I went into design, so it was always design focused with architecture and my training. So part of that, you mentioned earlier about architects, and there's always sort of a goal though, or a concept, or a inspiration that you're trying to convey with architecture itself, but going beyond that, right, with the story of what the interior spaces should be like, what they're influenced by, what you want people to feel. I think that's a natural progression. If you study that from an architectural way, you can really get more storytelling with it as you get into interiors.
I love it. And if you think about storytelling, whether if you're writing a story, telling a story, making a movie, designing a building, there's this narrative that I think the idea of design, which is really like solving a problem and telling a story, right?
Yeah.
And making sense out of a lot of different disparate
Yeah.
images and data points and into a cohesive narrative.
Right.
And when I heard you say a couple minutes ago, when you were in high school, you were painting and drawing. Because when I was in high school, I was painting, drawing, sculpting, doing all this creative stuff on the fine arts side.
Yeah.
And then I did a summer program one year for architecture, and then they actually taught what design was. And it was really interesting. And I'm still amazed, like, why don't we teach, or maybe that's a better question for you, like, what do you think the reason is that we'll teach fine arts, but not necessarily design? Like, you're drafting and drawing and painting,
Right.
but they don't really teach what the concept of design is at a young age.
Yeah, like the process. How
Yeah.
do you get from an idea to a reality? I mean, there are, schools and programs that do that, but it's not a core thing,
No.
and it really should. It's, to your point, it's problem solving. How do you solve that type of problem? And not problem in a bad way, but how do you create a use and a function for people, whether it's a school, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a home?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that way? And some people just do, and some people, it's not their thing, right? It's kind of interesting, even as we go through our process, right? So Gettys has a variety of services, and when we talk about, when you kind of go from a branding standpoint, coming up with those narratives and feelings, and then translating that into interior design and or architecture, some people are very visual, some people are more verbal. So you kind of have to use all those tools to get the ideas across. And so just that process in itself, comes through, in the professional sense, but it really should be part of curriculums. And it's odd, though, like a lot of people come out of, their family setting, a parent was creative in some way or technical in some other ways. Mine necessarily weren't either of those. It was just me gravitating toward it. I think I also tended to be a little precise and perfectionist, so I think I really enjoyed the drafting and making the drawings perfect, building models and making those perfect, even down to writing, penmanship, and then learning the architectural writing. I just really enjoyed that,
and it's
I
a
got
lost
good at
art.
it. So it is, and so I was that generational break, literally, where I learned all of that by hand in college even. And that's right when CAD was coming out. And so I started we were kind of on the leading edge of using computers for certain things, and then I started taking CAD classes on my own. Right when I started working, my first job was using CAD or CAD programs, but I hadn't really learned those through my curriculum in school. It was just not quite there, so I had to learn it pretty quickly on the fly, actually.
I think about, as you were talking about the branding, the design, the architecture, and even just some of the thought leadership that you guys do here, in particular, like Hotel of Tomorrow, too.
Yeah.
How do you weave all of those disciplines together? So, like, walk us through, like, at a high level. Okay,
Right.
so, like, a new project's coming in, they want you to do the whole kit and caboodle, so to speak.
Right.
Like, how do you collaborate with your team? How do you get the buy-in from the client and keep going and refining and getting it all to tell that cohesive story? And how do you know when you're done?
Right. I don't know if you ever know that you're done. It's funny. I was thinking about this. We have a large team meeting tomorrow, and back to your point around movie making or book writing or whatever, the creative process, John Lasseter, the great Disney producer guy, he said once, like, we don't ever finish creating the movies. We just release them. Like, you just get to a point, you're doing all these things, and the whole key is you're never done, but at some point you release them, right? I don't think we're ever really done designing. We just open the hotels. There's just this momentum, and you just have to pull all those things together. I like that comparison of, like, getting a movie out there and getting a hotel opened. But how do you do that? I mean, it takes a village, of course. It always starts with, though, a clear, collaborative client who, that's the best scenario, where they know what they're trying to achieve. They don't know how to necessarily get there, but they have a goal in mind of why they want that hotel to be created. it's definitely starting with, certainly in today's market, that clear story. How do you study the market? What's needed, let's say, in a particular city? What type of hotel for a certain type of guest? Just understanding that market and comp set is really important. And then if you understand that need, then you really start going down on that overall programming route. Now, typically, architects are kind of pulling together an overall shell of what's needed, if we're talking like a new build situation. But even a renovation or a conversion of an office building, which we've done a lot too, those are some of the most fun projects where you start with a building and then you transform it or turn it into a hotel. You just kind of start test fitting things against that market knowledge and market research and see what makes sense in that shell that's being created. The other side to that, though, is just creating those spaces and experience for guests that aren't there now. So, I think as we've seen over the last 10, 15 plus years, the hotel itself has all these different outlets and all these different experiences and spaces that they're looking for. So on the food and beverage side particularly, those spaces become like anchors to the hotel, but they don't necessarily need to feel like they're part of the hotel. There's that sort of like, you don't want to just be in a hotel bar or space. It just happens to be attached to a hotel. So understanding how much of that's necessary in a soft branded, story filled hotel like an Autograph or something. And I guess I'm very focused on the urban setting because we're staring at it. But if you start thinking about more natural settings or sites that are outside of urban areas, then it really starts to matter what's needed out there. What are the outdoor experiences or spaces that are needed? What's it's really what Gettys is sort of built on, right? It's this left brain and right brain thinking, being creative, coming up with beautiful spaces, but that are very functional, and then also bringing the greatest value possible to the real estate.
Yeah, so
that's really what we're trying to do, is pack the most into the space that allows the client to, be fiscally responsible with their investment, but then also have those guests. How can we get the guests to come back, to talk about it, to share their experience, and to, be a repeat kind of visitor?
I'm always intrigued by that idea of return on investment from an aesthetic or design perspective. So where, so you have that clear client who wants to collaborate. You're looking at building something new or repositioning something, and then what are some like good examples of elements within a project that you're like, oh, that ROI was great there? Because it's almost like you can't go in thinking solely about ROI, but it's always got to be back there, kind of in the back of your mind.
Oh, no, for sure. I think there's a couple of things there. One is just the function and flow of the space. I mean, there's just a functional need and use that works or doesn't work, and that can be very complicated to figure that out. But it's pretty basic stuff, right? We're all humans now. We're all different. We all have different tastes. But if a space is comfortable and welcoming, and people can sort of relate to it, and they can be communal, like we talked a little about earlier. A lot of what hospitality is just being communal and sharing that experience. If you provide spaces that allow for that, and it's a unique offering, it's maybe a slightly unexpected. It's comfortable and familiar, but it's an unexpected experience. That will draw people in. That'll bring people back, and they'll spend more money there, or they'll want to linger, right? It's kind of like being sticky. You want people to kind of stick to your spaces. A lot of it has to do with that research, the guest demographic and psychographic. Are you really targeting that need in that market? And who are you drawing in, and how are they being drawn to that? We had a project, where, again, the client, it's a project in Omaha called the Farnham, where they really were wanting to use that hotel as a draw. It was like the destination and a way to elevate that city or even that region of the city. And that was their goal. That was and they felt that they could and should do that. And
was it repositioning an area within Omaha?
Yeah, well, it was actually like back to my point around it was a conversion of an office building. And, it's always kind of maybe, the projects that really have legs are the ones that are part of some other greater moves in a city or an area. So this was part of a large city public block in front of them that they were redeveloping as a destination for the downtown. So they became part of that. And you're connecting to that, working on another project downtown San Antonio. It's a Curio. We have a lot of those fun, soft-branded hotels, like Autographs, Tapestries, Curios. Yeah. And this one, same thing. It's a new build, but it's part of this master redevelopment where there's a lot of open public outdoor areas, event spaces, F&B kind of offerings. And same thing. It's to elevate that whole city and become the gateway or the first destination you have from the time you leave the airport. The next thing you see or are at is your hotel. Yeah. So it becomes like that first memory maybe of your visit to the city. So
I know you just mentioned all those really kind of fun, independent, soft branded hotels. I think also what's interesting about what you guys have done really well here is you're doing, that luxury / independent soft branded space. Right. But then you also have like a whole arm of really nailing select service and helping develop brands and doing kind of like the thinking for the bigger brands. Totally. Like that must be really cool. It's fun. How do you place yourself between those two arenas?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, Gettys has been around quite a long time now. So over all these years, we've built a lot of relationships.
I was at your 30th birthday party.
You probably were. Yeah,
or Gettys' 30th birthday party.
You were. I don't think I knew you that many years ago, but Gettys, right? 30. Yeah, we're past 30 years now, and I think over the years we've just built that reputation of being just hospitality focused, right? And so we've gathered and kind of all that stuff is stuck to us, and our team here, Roger and Andrew and Ron and all the rest of the group here, we've seen it all, and we can apply that same focus or thinking across the different types as you mentioned. So, select service, that's a certain type of process and need versus the full service or the soft branded story filled hotels. But the other side, I think, is just we're committed to it. We're passionate around it, and hospitality is sort of desired in some other worlds now too, right? People want whatever they think the definition of hospitality is in multifamily housing and other kind of spaces.
Yeah. Multifamily, aviation, office, education. Right. It's really getting pulled in to everywhere. Yeah. But it's weird because I feel like, is that just a recent phenomenon, or has it always been that way and now I'm just noticing because I'm having all these great conversations?
No, it's more recent. I mean, I think it's now been there a little while. I mean, we were asked to do some of those types of things 5, 10 plus years ago. Sometimes it takes everyone to catch up. Some of the early ones, they're not ready for it.
So what do you think has helped us kind of crest that barrier to where what we all do in our world is needed or wanted by everyone? It's like a magic formula.
Yeah, I think more people have had access to those spaces. So whether they've experienced those in hotels or restaurants, people have gone out and they're out more, pandemic aside. They have a taste for that, and there might be a little more financial ability to do those things and go see those places and spaces. But I also think because the demand's there, then building owners, developers, and the like, they see that they can make more money by providing those types of spaces, so right? Supply and demand really drives it to some degree. So if they want to differentiate themselves, create a higher rent a higher rate in their hotel, they're going to do it.
Yeah, I was just having lunch in New York City, and it was some Class A office building, like one of these over here,
Right.
where the lobbies tend to be,
Yeah.
a little underutilized, let's
Yeah,
just say.
yeah.
And I forget who the ownership group, some big private equity company.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, I want to activate this area, and they put in a restaurant that's kind of open. It's a little unusual that they did it there, but it added such a level of warmth and activation that now they're like, oh my God, I want to do this at all of our Class A office buildings like around the world. Like how can we re-look at that?
Yeah, and we were studying that, like I said, years ago for some owners of buildings that we have partnerships with, and some of those came to fruition and some didn't. It's just what I think it comes down to dollars and cents a lot for some of those buildings. But I think going back to the notion of why that's becoming so important, I think for better or for worse too, design has become a little more just out there, right? There's entire channels on TV that express design, and there's just more of a knowledge base around it and an appreciation for it on all fronts, really.
Yeah, and I just over the 20 years that I've been doing this, I do see, even just look at how Target transformed retail, or even Apple transformed retail. Yeah. It's really by investing in the design of those spaces. Right?
Well, it's an experience.
And
it's a reflection of those brands, right? So, Apple, their product has a certain feeling, and there's loyalty to it, but they've created a brand. Everything that defines that brand is clear and understandable, and I guess desirable. People are like drawn to it. I think the hotel brands obviously want to be very clear with the definition of their hotel and their brand. And you talked about our history and we do have good relationships, and we are working with a lot of brands to clarify that and to help with that. It's funny, the more they seek out the expertise from firms and companies, the better off they are. They get more input. If you just stay within the walls of your company, you're really not going to grow. You're not going to understand or see the outside world. So, to their credit, the brands are really trying to define, right? So many brands have been created over the last 15 plus years, as you know, and that provides a lot of interest for work. So it keeps everyone in business, which is nice, but it makes it difficult to sort of slice and dice.
Yeah, because like
all those brands.
How do you differentiate, and how do you create that unique experience? But then I guess it comes down to, just all the different shapes, sizes, colors, and flavors of people. Yeah. That I think you said psychographic before, right? It's scary when you're planning a business or a brand to really do such a tight bullseye. Yeah. But that's also when you do it well. Yeah. It's scary because you're focusing on something at the expense of a lot of other, right? So but that's also, I think, what in well done brands, that's what drives the value, because then you build these raving fans of the brand.
You do, yeah. You just build loyalty and you build comfort, and unique experiences. That's why that's what's really fun about the soft brand hotels. That's why we love them. That's why we love creating those stories, and the name and the just that experience. I love hard branded hotels too. And it's a really strong experience, and it's clear, it's consistent, and it provides all your needs. Those are great. Those work out very well too. But I think for me and for Gettys particularly, the ones that we can point to, there's nothing else like it. It's the flagship of the city, let's say, or it was the renovation of a historic tower. We did Rand Tower in Minneapolis, and that was this beautiful Art Deco building. And we sort of like reinvigorated the building itself, through the hotel.
I did
and the
another
story.
one years ago with you. It was the Leveque Tower, which is
Sure.
like a huge
Yep.
Art Deco in
Same,
Columbus.
exactly, in Columbus, Ohio, yeah.
But that was the tallest building
Yeah.
west of the Mississippi? No, it's not west
It'd
of the
be east,
Mississippi.
up to some time, yeah.
Up till they built the Empire State Building. Maybe that's what it was,
Yeah.
because that's east of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And then New York
Yeah.
kind of blew it out of the water when
Yeah.
they went crazy.
Yeah. No, I know. Those are the projects that are just really
And then also,
exciting.
I just saw Roger Hill from Gettys is he from Racine?
He's from Racine, yes.
But now they're working on some cool, and that you think about like Johnson Wax and all those other really cool buildings there.
Yeah.
What's that project that you guys are working on?
Hotel Verdant. Yeah, it's in Racine. It's a current project that we're working on. It's always the hometown projects are nice, right? So that's why going back to Chicago and all that. I definitely worked on a lot of hotels in my backyard, in our backyard, and those are great. You can take friends to them. My family. I've gone to some hotels that we've worked on. Those are the ones that are really meaningful. When you stay there, you can share those with your friends or family.
Totally.
In your town. It's like if you're on a baseball team and you play at home, it's probably the same thing, right?
Yeah. Well, it has its pluses and minuses, right? And then you're just like, oh my God, it's right.
Well, yeah, and then people pick it apart.
Yeah.
Too. Like,
come on
why
over.
did you do that?
Come look at this one thing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I got
Right.
1,000 other things to do.
Or the kids are running around. You're like, don't do that. You can't climb on that.
Yes.
Or don't mess with that.
Yeah, put your hard hat on.
Yeah.
So, Chris, as kind of looking back from when you were a kid and your architectural and design journey, to all of your experience being at Gettys, leaving Gettys, coming back, kind of where I feel like our whole industry is on this ascendant trajectory, after coming out through whatever we all just came out of.
Yeah.
What is exciting you most about what you're seeing in the medium to long term?
Wow, it's so exciting. We are in a good place, to your point. The hospitality industry is strong right now. There's a lot of new creation of brands and new avenues for our firm and hospitality design to be infused into. I just get excited around, being back at Gettys. I'm very comfortable here and collaborating with the team. I get really excited when we come up with something that we hadn't thought of before, just through those conversations or sketches or just clicks in a meeting. So
It could be something from like super grand to super precise and minimal.
You don't really know exactly how you'll solve these challenges or these problems. You just have to be like, gotta keep your eyes open a little bit and have as much inspiration come to as many people as possible. But it has to be orchestrated. It has to be curated a little bit, right? It just can't be like a shotgun approach. That's why I think that research and that understanding of what the needs are is really important. But I just really get excited when we come up with something, it clicks, a younger designer or a team member gets it, and then they kind of play around with it, sketching it or on the computer, and then when we come back and it's even better than when we left the conversation. And then that notion of then working with in a meeting with a client, showing it to them, and they have questions or they have responses to it. That's just the fun part of it. Is truly
It's almost like solving puzzles, right?
It is. It's like.
Do you do puzzles?
No, actually, puzzles drive me nuts. I don't have the patience for it, I think.
Because you'd rather just, instead of figuring out what was already done, hey, I'm just going to blaze a new path.
Yeah, a little bit. Just trying to figure out how you'd flow and flow through a space, how you would use a space, or how a guest would use a space. Because that's part of it too. It's not really about what I want or we want. We put our heart into it and we put our best foot and our best commitment forward. But it's really about the guest. You can put your own personal spin and take on things, but we are really designing for people, for guests. It's not really about our particular taste or style.
So what's a new challenge that you were presented with that you got that light bulb experience where the whole team kind of came together, collaborated, and you were like, Eureka, or whatever you do whenever you say, land ho.
Oh, man. I've only been back for 2 months, so I don't know how many I've had of those. No, it's funny. I mentioned that one Curio project. We were doing some planning for it. It's a very open plan, a lobby and bar, and it opens up to a cafe and to the outside. And, the team was starting to experiment with some of those planning moves, and there were 3 or 4 of us in a meeting. And, just sitting there and listening, and we're all taking things in, and we were talking about just different locations and different spots where the bar should go and what that would, just a very basic kind of situation. But it wasn't like clear, it wasn't easy exactly how we should master plan or space plan that public area, but it was a really important decision to make or to test. So we were sitting there and we worked through it, and we came up with some options, and that bar location, we kind of tied it together with a grand stair that's in the space. And we knew we could do something really interesting and fun with it, and it would be a focal point. And it really made sense flow-wise, too, through the space. So team put that together, and then they presented it last week. And that one plan we all came up with at the end was by far, you could just even tell in the room, everyone was like, yep, like that's it. And then when certain things are locked and click like that, then everything else just kind of flows naturally from it. So that's just one basic, simple example. But like the team all got it. We all rallied around it in a meeting all together. We were in the office together. We were collaborating. We were looking each other in the eye. And then the team went down, presented it. The client got excited around it, and now we can move ahead,
Awesome.
So it's fun, totally fun.
And then when you think about when you have that moment where where the planets align, so to speak, you've done all the work and you feel it. You feel it in your heart.
Yeah.
It's the right one.
Yeah.
As far as the other disciplines you have here from even specifically on the branding side.
Yeah.
That's always interesting to me as far as how do you tie those two things together? Because in some ways when it's done so well, again, it's almost like you don't notice it,
right.
But you gotta it's just, it all has to be so intertwined and part of the same DNA.
Yeah. It's not easy. I mean, we struggle with it sometimes, honestly, right? It's not an easy process, but we're kind of doing it together. I think that's part of the key is there is a research-based approach also on the creation of the story. Now, we usually want to root it in something that's either historical or inspirational of that area, whether it's the city or the state or the name of the person that created that building, whatever that research is. You can kind of start to get a palette or an arsenal of stuff to draw from. And then the different brains think differently, right? We start to think about, we start to think about how you would apply that in a built sense. Branding, they start to think about how they would apply it in a naming sense or a feeling sense or a logo sense or a definition of what that should be sense. And I think that's the beauty of it, right? Where you create that final sort of inspiration, and then you start in your head to think about, well, how could I apply that to a floor plan? How do I apply that to a bar? How do I apply that to pieces of furniture? And again, there's a lot of different levels of doing that, and there's different brands that want it different ways. But you're totally right where when they combine and they are seamless, that's usually a successful
That's when you just release
situation. Yeah, then you open that hotel,
Yeah,
right?
then you
stop designing,
screen the movie,
and you move it. Yeah, you get it out there. But it's very complicated. You still have to operate it, you still have to promote it, you have to sell it, you have to deliver on that. So it takes a lot of the weakest link in that situation. Kind of makes it all fall down. So you got to really try to tie it all together. It's really important.
And support everyone and just keep ideating.
Yeah.
And I love that. And looking just kind of, I know I mentioned Hotel of Tomorrow, but it's also like that ethos. It didn't just come up through there, right? I think that that's part of all of what you guys do here. It's like, how do we keep thinking? How do we keep thinking about this and pushing and leaning forward? And I don't know, it's just a really, I don't know. I've just always been a big fan.
Yeah, no, I've always appreciated how we're trying to push the envelope a little bit and try to see what's next. You know, the one constant in our industry, but the one constant here at Gettys is change. We do keep changing and evolving and pushing. Now, there's a lot of continuity here too, which I think is one of our strengths. Yeah. So, yeah.
But I do feel like you're always reinventing, and you've been here for 30 years. Yeah. But I feel like every time I walk in here, it's like there's
new stuff going on.
New stuff going on. No, it feels new.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to hear that, but I think that's true. I mean, yes.
Even though you're so old.
Right, I know. It's shocking that I don't want every day to be the same. That's definitely not, there's never the same thing happening day to day or week to week.
So I like to go on like a little thought experiment. So going back to, I love that visual of you on the bridge on the southwest side.
Okay,
right?
sure.
You're looking at Chicago.
Right.
How old were you?
Oh, God, I don't know. Yeah, like probably, early teens. 10,
teens.
11, 12, 13, somewhere in there.
12.
Sure, yeah.
So.
Cubs fan. Yeah. With my mitt on the handlebar of my bike. Okay.
It's like the
Paint a picture here.
Yeah, it's like the Sandlot. There you go. The dog's barking. He's coming. He's chasing you. But if you were able to stand in front of yourself, your current self, that I'm speaking to, in front of your 12-year-old self, and thinking about the journey that you went on and where you are, and like kind of leading with your heart in that way, what, and knowing when it's right and feeling it, like what advice do you give your younger self?
Or my kids.
Or your kids, yeah. It could be your kids. But your kids might not listen to you.
No, they don't, really.
But your younger self might.
Yeah.
Imagine it might freak them out too.
That's a tough question, Dan. You don't really have any. I don't really have any regrets or things that I took a wrong turn on or wish I had done that differently. You kind of have to just be confident. Hopefully, you've had parents or mentors in your life or just people that help guide you that give you the confidence to kind of be yourself. And the older I get, the more comfortable, ideally, the more comfortable you get, and the more you're about just being yourself and bringing the best you can of yourself. So when you're younger, right, you don't have that confidence or that experience or that ability to have that perspective on something. But I don't know. I think try to focus and do the things you enjoy.
Yeah.
I know that's cliched.
No,
but
that's because there's truth to it.
Yeah, and if you can, just work your ass off.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't handed really too many things ever really in my life, and so somehow my parents, my dad, instilled something in me, or I had something in me already. But I know I worked hard.
So I want to go into that one too, because you said something about having your family or mentors kind of support you and do what you love, right? But you also said earlier that your parents were not necessarily creative people. What did your mom and dad do?
Yeah, so I mean, my dad worked on the railroad his whole life. He was blue collar,
in Chicago,
or like
across
freight trains.
Oh, wow.
He was, right? He wasn't. Yeah, he was outside most of the time. He worked hard. And my mom was more just like a office manager type of person. More like bookkeeping, accounting, things like that. So more nuts and bolts, kind of blue collar, really. And I don't know.
So when you went down this creative path,
it was technically
were they
creative.
Fully supportive always, or were they like, ooh, what?
No. I think that was fine. It wasn't like I went and I don't know what would have happened. I wasn't trying to be an artist. I wasn't trying to be a poet or something that's maybe a little more ethereal or difficult maybe to find a job. I don't know. Architect it blended both sides to it, which I think I naturally, again, gravitated towards. But they were, super supportive. I think they just definitely wanted me and my brother to go to college and figure that out. And again, I got lucky. The thing I liked, I stuck with, and I stayed that. I just became an architect.
And it was just you and your brother?
Yep. We have one younger brother.
And what does he do?
He actually, until recently, was a baseball coach. He was in baseball his whole life.
You do love baseball.
So we, two brothers, and my dad, we all loved baseball, played every sport, always was outside, just outside playing whatever sport the season was in.
And now you have 5 daughters.
I have 5 daughters.
Unbelievable.
And not as sport-focused in general, on average, I'd say. They do many other things, but we've got 2 of them playing softball, which is good.
Cool.
So that's fun. Yeah.
And then if you think about you and your parents supporting you and being there for you, like how do you replicate that for your daughters?
Yeah, it is just being there and supporting them. I mean, just being present, encouraging them, helping them. And back to your point, even, it wasn't, growing up here was helpful in Chicago. We traveled around the country a little bit, but it wasn't like I wasn't a well-traveled person by any means. But my dad, my mom would try to take us places. We would come downtown. We would do things at Grant Park. We would, we usually drove everywhere versus flying, kind of typical situation, it seems, for a lot of us growing up. So I back to what I'd say to my younger self, or what we try to do with our kids, we want to just give them as many experiences as possible, to give them as many different perspectives on life and culture and all that, because, at the end of the day, being able to talk to people and share things with people and be open-minded, the only way to do that is to experience all the different aspects of our world.
Totally.
So we want to do that more and more with our kids, so they have that.
Like, for my wife and I, with our kids, that whole give them as much experience as possible, that totally resonates with me.
Yeah.
And it's weird, like you think about the past couple of years, we haven't been able to do that travel and different types of experiences for a nice chunk of that, because we were just locked in our house.
I know.
So that was tough, and I think we got to make up for lost time.
I know. No, I totally agree. Now we gained, I think, that hopefully closeness and bonding and other aspects that people hopefully will take with them through this. But that travel and that experiencing other perspectives and cultures is really important.
Totally.
So
Well, I've loved our conversation and hearing about your journey. If people wanted to learn more from you or get in touch with you in some way, like what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, certainly going to the Gettys website helps understand, what we're doing. I'm on there, but really, my email address is probably the best way to go. It's cmcdonough@gettys.com. CMCDONOUGH@gettys.com.
Great.
Yeah.
And then we'll put your LinkedIn up there too. If you're
absolutely.
Well.
I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
And out there in a couple other ways, but that's the main way to go. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. And welcome back. And thank you, Chicago, for the amazing view.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time.
This was a lot of fun. I appreciate this. Good to talk to you. Good to reconnect. This has been the nice part about coming back to Gettys, is rekindling all those connections and relationships that I had. Kept up with a little bit of them, but now it's really more meaningful, and I really enjoy seeing the faces again in person, right? I was at BDNY a few weeks ago. That was great to really re-immerse myself, so.
Reconnection. I think that's a great theme for at least the next 24 months for all of us. Even though you actually came back and you're reconnecting, I think it's for all of us. We're still like getting our feet under us, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an interesting time that I leapt back into the hospitality pool, actually.
Totally.
Yeah, timed out well, I think.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, I'd also like to just thank all of our listeners. I mean, we're growing every single week. It's amazing, and without you guys, we wouldn't be sitting here in downtown Chicago. So if this changed your idea of hospitality or creating spaces that exude hospitality, please pass it along. It's all been word of mouth thus far, and thank you all, and we'll catch you next time.